Welcome to this Docker All Hands session about a demo that shows you how easy it is to create your own little Docker extension with the real life example of finding out what the size of an image is without having to pull it. But first of all, let me introduce myself. I am Tobias Fenster, one of the managing partners of 4PS Germany. We are a company that creates a cloud-based ERP system for construction companies. We are also part of the international 4PS group. On the community side, I'm a Microsoft Regional Director as well as a Microsoft MVP for both Azure and for Business Central, and I'm an ambassador for Traffic and for Portainer. If you want to follow along what I'm doing, you can find my Twitter handle, my LinkedIn handle here. You can find the URL to my blog, and there you will also find my little podcast window on technology. But with that, let's dive right into our topic. As I said, I want to show you how easy it is to create your own Docker extension. And that is something that I myself wanted to find out for quite some time, actually since the very initial announcement about Docker extensions. I found it very interesting and I was always kind of looking for an example that I could use for giving it a try. I don't want to dive into Docker extensions itself because I'm sure you've already seen the content, you've seen the announcement, you have a general idea what it does. But instead, I want to walk you through an actual example of how you can create your own little Docker extension. So as I said, I was waiting for a good problem or a good question that we could find for answering it with a Docker extension. And that actually came along when someone asked the question on a community mailing list, how can I find the size of an image without having to pull it first? And the answer for that, of course, is a Docker manifest inspect, which gives you all the information that you need in a JSON format. You can take a look at the different layers, at the config size, and then you can sum it all up, convert it into kilobytes, megabytes, whatever you need. And then you have your answer how big that is. But actually, that's not very user-friendly, right? It's not a great answer having to sift through the JSON file and finding out all the different numbers there. So a better answer, I thought, would be let's create a Docker extension. And if you take a look at the quick start for Docker extensions, then you will find that Docker extension init is the actual command for creating the bare bones of your own Docker extension. So I went with that. But then when I went through the process of creating my extension, I found out, well, there is a backend and a front end part in the standard extension. I actually don't need the backend, but it is very easy to remove and it brings you all the stuff that you need. So I still want to show you in this demo how we can use Docker extension init. Maybe you find an example where you need a backend and then you just keep it. But for my example, I will show you how we can easily remove it as well. Now the Docker extension init has one part when it installs the npm packages that takes a couple of minutes. So I decided to pre-record this. We'll walk through the recording now so I can fast forward in that place and we don't have to wait for npm to do its job. So let's take a look at the recording here and get started. So you can see here, I'm doing the Docker extension init as expected with a name, and that actually also is the name of the folder that will be created, image size demo. Now it asks me for the Docker Hub repository. I use my own namespace Tobias Fenster and then image size demo as the name of the repository. I am asked to enter a description. I say a fantastic extension to get the size of an image because it's fantastic, and that's exactly what it does. And then we have the question about the vendor. I created it, so let's do that. And I kept the extension SDK version as a default. Now it's creating the backend part as a first step, and then it's creating the front end part. And you can see here that it actually says installing npm packages. This may take a few minutes, and it actually does on my machine. So let's fast forward a bit here in the recording. And then after a couple of minutes, you will see that it finishes at some point. And now we are actually done. We have created our extension and we can take a look at it. So now I want to switch into Visual Studio Code, where you can see this is what we get as a pre-created extension. And you can see here we have the UI part, which is of course the front end. And then we have the VM part, which is the back end, but we don't need that. So let's just delete it. And then the other thing that I want to show you is that, of course, the Docker whale is a nice icon, but I actually want to use a different one. So let's put in my own SVG image here. take a look at the Docker file and replace it here. So we're copying in that one. And then in the metadata JSON, it also has an icon. And there, of course, we're using mine. The other thing that we need to remove now that we've already removed the folder is the corresponding stage in the Docker file. Because in this part here, the backend would be created if we had a backend. So I'll just delete that. And then it's also copied in from the builder stage into the final stage. And I'm removing that as well. So with that, we've now basically removed the backend part and we've replaced the icon and we would be more or less ready to go. So I'll do a quick commit here just so that I can easily show you what I will change. So this is not technically required. It's just that I have an easier time walking you through the changes that I made. Because now I'm going to take a look at my pre-created solution that, by the way, is also publicly available on GitHub if you want to take a look for yourself. And now we will copy in the changed files, and that is only the app TSX file. So let's copy mine in here. Yes, to replace it. And then I had to add a couple of additional packages. So let's also copy in the package JSON and the package log JSON. Yes. Okay, so let's take a look at what has actually changed. First of all, in the package JSON. And now it's still working on it. Let's see, should get that in a second. Here we are. So in the package JSON, I have added icons material and I have added the lab repository or the lab package here because we're going to use a tree view and the tree view is available through the lab. That is more or less the changes that I did in the package JSON, but let's also take a look at the app TSX. As I said, I'm adding the tree view component here and the tree item component, which is, of course, an item in the tree. And I'm using two icons, which is why I needed the icons material thing. Then I added this little function here that converts a byte number into the corresponding kilobytes, megabytes, gigabytes, and so on. And yeah, I'm a developer, so I copied it over from Stack Overflow. At least I added a link to it. Then I'm creating a couple of interfaces, and those interfaces actually correspond to the information that we get when we run a Docker manifest inspect. Give you an idea, let's open up the console here, do a Docker manifest inspect, and let's just use traffic as an example. So now we have the response, and there you can see we have two manifests, we have a size, we have a platform, we have an architecture, as you can see here, and so on. And basically what I did with those interfaces, I created TypeScript representations of those interfaces so I can more easily handle them. Then in the app, I added some React standard stuff that you can see here. And then I added a button, and this button would call the Docker client. So this is also a very convenient way to find out more from the Docker or use the Docker client. You can see here that I'm running the manifest inspect for an image that we point in, and then we add the verbose so that we get all the information that we need. So again, a very easy way to interact with the Docker client from a Docker extension so that basically you can do everything that you need in your extension that is available as a CLI command. You can easily call that from here. Then I'm just parsing the result, as you can see here, and then I'm making a differentiation if I only got one or if I got an array. So that's just, yeah, a simple part here. The other thing that I want to point out is that I can also use the Docker UI. And in this case, I'm showing an error message. And when we go to the demo in the end, I will show you also how that looks. But I really like how easily it is as an extension developer to also interact with standard components in Docker Desktop. so that you can style your error messages, your information messages, and so on in the same way that you would have it if it is a part of Docker Desktop Standard. Then we have the function that creates our tree view. Just to quickly walk through that one, I'm basically going through all the manifests. If you have more than one, I'm formatting the reference a bit so that we can easily find out what is the version, what is the platform, what is the operating system, and so on. And then I'm calculating the size. There is first the size of the configuration, which I'm storing here. Then we have the size of the layers. We are adding them up here, as you can see, walking through all the layers and then calculating the sum of them. And then we have the total size, which is, of course, the configuration plus all of the layers. And then we're adding them into our tree view. So we have one node or one item for the overall image. Then we have the total size, the size of the config, the size of the layers. And then we also have our own little subtree here that gives the information what each of those layers has. So we went through this in a couple of minutes. And if you're familiar with React, this is pretty trivial code. I think the powerful part really is how you can interact with the CLI and how you can interact with the Docker Desktop UI, and then just present whatever content you want to present. Then I've removed the standard text here and put in my own text. And in the end, I've added a button that triggers the logic to get the size of the image. And that's basically it. With that, we are done. We have our little Docker extension that retrieves the size of a publicly available image by just looking at the manifest inspect command. But of course, you want to see how it looks and also probably how you can create it. So let's do a Docker build. I called it image size demo. And this build is going to take a bit as well. So I'm going to fast forward, and actually I forgot to start Docker Desktop. So that's the next thing where I'll fast forward for a bit. Okay, here we are. Docker Desktop has started. So let's try the Docker build again. And now it's starting. As I said, this takes a couple of minutes on my laptop as well. So I'll fast forward here again. And actually, we are already done. So we have it in place. The last step now is to do an Docker extension install. And we name and confirm that we actually want to do this. And now it's setting up all the stuff in Docker Desktop. And if we take a look here, now you can see we have the image size demo here. We have my own little avatar here. And we have an input for getting the image size. And if we're loading this, it takes a couple of seconds, and then it will have retrieved the manifest information. And now you can see here, okay, this is the AMD 64. We have the total size, we have the config size, we have the different layers. We can take a look at this. And as I said, we can also use standard error messages. So if I use an image name that doesn't exist, we get a standard Docker UI image error message, the same that I would get if I ran this command on the command line. Okay, with that, I have shown you what I wanted to show you, how we can create our own little Docker extension to get the size of an image. Thanks a lot for your attention. If you want to follow, as I said, go to Twitter on Tobias Fenster or take a look at tobiasfenster.io. Thanks a lot for watching, and have fun with all the rest of the Docker All Hands.